Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Annalisa Cochrane to talk all about her Peacock series, One of Us is Lying. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the character development work that you did even going into the audition, because it sounds like you really utilized Carrick McManus's book even at that point, and that it was an incredibly valuable tool, not only even when you had the scripts and were working on the show, but even in the audition, in really getting a lot of that backstory, a lot of the inner monologue moments and dialogue that comes through in the book. And so how did that really help you in shaping and making a lot of the choices that you made for how you wanted to approach the character, even going into the audition room when you didn't have all of the details to hand yet?
Yeah. I mean, it was everything because it's written in that first person narrative. It you go straight into, like you were saying, the inner monologue of this character. And so often when I'm approaching a character, I like to kind of create these imagined circumstances and really like live those out in my imagination. So it becomes, that event in your childhood at 8 years old becomes so real so that you can take that for your character. And in this, I had everything laid out. Usually I'll have to like make up an event or make up as they age what happened to make them the way they are now. And Karen wrote in, even if it's one line about specifically my character being in beauty pageants, her mom putting her in beauty pageants and always coming in second place and always like not being quite good enough to be first, being quite good enough to keep a man, to whatever. Like that was all these just kind of like one liners in the book that I was able to take and just expand into the full self, the full character, fully kind of go through that imagination process and then, journal about it. And then I remember just like doing the callbacks and everything and having it kind of flow then naturally. Like the character was just there. I mean, I did spend a lot of time on some of the callbacks, but just to make sure it was there. And the character, she was there. So it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, and with you bringing up the relationship with her mom, I really wanted to talk about that because it feels like it's such a pivotal part to so many elements of who she is, but also the journey that she goes on throughout the series and who she starts trying to decide that she wants to be instead of who she has been.
Mhm.
And there is that psychological element of what does it mean to grow up in a space with a mom who values you for your looks and doesn't consider the rest of your assets as a person. And even when something hugely tragic is going on, that her mom's like, well, this is your 15 minutes of fame. Like, you need to be wearing more makeup if you're going to fix your relationship with your boyfriend. You're the cute blonde one and you need to go out and put yourself out in the world that way. And so how did that really build so much of the psychological element of the character for you, just knowing that these are the sorts of things that she has been being told every single day of her life for years on end, and thus how she perceives herself as a result of that?
Yeah, that's everything to who she is today. And to see and have watched her mom be talked to every day like that, and watch her mom also, and how her mom's relationship with Addie's father was, how her mom has boyfriends and can't quite hang on to them, how her mom then takes her hurt and her pain and puts it on her daughter and wants to take the life that she couldn't have and have her daughter live that out. That really, really informs specifically Addie. And Addie, like we all just we want our parents' approval. We want our parents to love us and like we want to make them proud. But that's not Addie at all. And it's like she finally, when she starts kind of being free of those expectations and finding actually who she is, I think that she realizes that. And I really hope in season 2 that we can kind of explore that dynamic more as Addie goes from this kind of that insecure, always needing approval to this strong character, and how that affects her relationship with her mother. Because she says some pretty pointed things to her mother. Like it's not the best relationship, but they can get to a point too where, you get to see the mom also dealing with Addie's kind of new self. I hope that actually becomes a thing because like you were saying, that psychological effect every single day being told you're not good enough. You need this. You need to put on more makeup. You need to dress better, blah, blah, blah. Like, what does that do to a young girl? My goodness. Yeah.
Did you look at a lot of the costumes that she wore early on in the series as really being a reflection of her mother versus her, and a way of her mom exerting control? Because there are moments in the show where we literally also see her mom telling her what to wear
Yeah.
versus the things that she starts doing to externally express herself later in the season.
Oh, entirely. And that was a huge conversation that we had kind of behind the scenes too, between the producers, our costume designer. Is in the beginning, Addie tends to show a lot more skin, tends to be kind of like a little bit cutesy at times, like
just a little, sometimes sexy, but she's putting on all these things that don't feel necessarily her. And I think that like you get to see a little bit of her. Like she likes her flannels. She likes kind of like almost like covering up in a way. She likes kind of a little bit more of that, like, for like the androgynous shape. And you get to see as the show goes on, she gets more and more comfortable with dressing like that. And I think it's so great that we have that scene where her mom throws these like clothes at her, and they're the skimpiest clothes, the short shorts. And you're like, whoa, mom, for school? But that says so much about like what her mom values and what her mom thinks is going to help Addie in life. And that's like, she's just speaking from her experience, her experience as a woman moving through this world, her experience as a blonde, woman of just who she is. Yeah, I lost my train of thought there for a second, but that's her experience. And so she is just telling Addie what she knows. And it's not very different than who Addie is actually.
And you have her getting more and more comfortable with the clothing that she's then choosing for herself. And then obviously there's the transformational haircut, which is a reflection of really kind of shedding her past. And with that confidence as well, it also just feels like she comes across very differently on screen in the way that she holds herself. And so how did you want to create a physical transformation in even just the way that she held herself in scenes and the way that you moved in moments instead?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was something I tried to pay just attention to and was working on a little bit with my coach. And like, just in the beginning, she's constantly, and it's great in the book, it talks a lot about her insecurity and just always using her hair as something to cover up and always playing with it and always kind of like messing with it, that like very nervous energy. And then also kind of like a little bit, she's wearing these sexy clothing, but like she's just trying to hide a little bit. And I think you see that progression too, is when Jake breaks up with her, and when the cheating story comes out, you see her starting to wear these like baggier clothes, and kind of like she hunches more, and she like even more hides away. And then when you cut off her hair, and she can't hide behind that. And there's even a scene where I tried to like reach up to like grab her hair, and you see that it's not there anymore. And she realizes that, I mean, how that almost frees her, because it's like, I can't hide behind the weight of this anymore. So I have to put your shoulders back, face the world as it comes, and move forward, just continue to move. And it's funny because I didn't think, you read the book and you don't think Addie herself, she doesn't think she's going to be able to go on without Jake and without this. And it was very, very transformational for me too, to be able to play a character that does something like that and comes out only stronger and freer. Oof, just what a model. Like, I need to cut my hair. I need to go like face the world, shoulders back, hiding behind nothing, face the world as myself. And yeah, it was a really, really good lesson.
You were bringing up there working with your acting coach on that. And is that something where you work with your acting coach on all of the characters and all of the roles that you do? And particularly for a show like this, what were the elements that you really wanted to hone in and finesse with them?
I think it was a lot of just really focusing on like the little relationship dynamics, and really kind of getting, I think I'm a little bit of like an outside in type of actor, where, you start off with like the posture and everything. So that's kind of, you start there and you go and kind of like picturing and talking and just discussing. So much of it just comes from talking. And you're like, what do you think like she would think here? I always feel like acting coaches are sometimes almost therapists for the character, because they'll ask a question and then you'll just talk. And you're like, oh, and then that sparks something else. But yeah, we really like focused just then on the little dynamics of kind of the relationships, and, what really each character meant to Addie, and how, we all act differently with different people. And so how that also affects things, like when she goes back to Jake and she goes back to being kind of submissive in a way, and kind of like letting him take the lead and letting him do things. That's a different type of, or a different part of Addie than who she is with Janae. And so that was kind of the focus, was just finding out where these little things kind of change and the little nuances of character and self.
Yeah. And the development of the relationship that she starts to build with Janae is so formative to her as well, because that's the moment where she is forming this friendship and is completely shedding what anybody else thinks, what anybody's expectations of her are. And you really get to see the walls come down, and a lot of the walls that she's built up because of those insecurities that you were talking about before. And so particularly in that relationship dynamic, how did that give you a lot more breadth in terms of the layers that you could add to her as a character, because she is shedding all of that?
So much. And this is shout out to the writers too, because they really added in the side of Addie that is funny and the side of Addie that is a little silly and weird, and that she never gets to experience with Jake or her mom. She gets to experience a little bit with TJ. And I think that TJ is her first understanding, even though she rejects him and he ultimately rejects her. But he's her first understanding that, oh, maybe someone could like me if I'm truly myself. So then she sees that, and then her relationship with Janae allows her to add in these layers of humor, add in these layers of sarcasm, add in all these different sides of herself that she's hiding, and ultimately make her human. Like none of us are just that surface perfect Stepford wife type of thing. We all have those like weird parts to ourselves. And so there was something so fun too playing off of Jessica McLeod, who plays Janae, because her character absolutely does not care what the world thinks. And so I think Addie gets to see that, and even me watching Jess play that, like starting to almost adopt little things, you always kind of adopt little things that your friends do. And like in some of our rehearsals, we kind of started to do those things too, as we got closer. And so it's just a great dynamic getting to work with her.
Yeah. Were there conversations that you had about who you wanted Addie to be within that relationship with Jake? Because it is that element where, later on when she's talking about how she would never even order food when she went out to eat, and she'll eat something that she doesn't even like because someone else is ordering it. And you start to get those inklings, like episode by episode, of how it was actually a bit more controlling than you even realized at the beginning. But yet you still had to play to that at the beginning before the audience have those details. And so were there a lot of conversations that you had in really figuring out the nuance of what that needed to look like?
Yeah, there weren't, because a lot of that is in the book, there weren't as many conversations, but I definitely in the beginning was talking to our writer, creator, and showrunner, and kind of going over to, because there is a slight difference between the book Addie and the show Addie. And I think, for me, there was a little bit of a struggle with, in the book, I do love that Addie is able to tell Jake that she cheated on him. She has that strength to tell him. And so I think I missed elements of that Addie in the show Addie in the beginning in her relationship with Jake. And then it was talking to them and realizing, no, in the show, we don't have an older sister. So in the show, Addie doesn't have any security. And it's like Maslow's hierarchy, right? You need kind of that security and shelter to be able to grow. And so understanding it from that perspective, Addie she doesn't have that in the show. The only person she can trust is, herself. She can't trust her mom. She can't exactly trust her friends, Vanessa and Keely. And she definitely can't fully be herself with Jake or trust Jake. And so realizing that, I was like, okay. And talking to them, I was like, okay, it all kind of makes sense. This show Addie, and why she has to act the way she does, and why she can't tell him. And I remember like reading the scripts and being like, Addie, girl, like, don't give up Bronwyn. Like, when I tell on Bronwyn in the interrogation room, I'm like, don't do that. But it's all part of the building and growing, where Addie in the show, you have to make those mistakes in order to grow. And I think the book was able to kind of skip a little bit of that because she had someone to lean on. And I think it's ultimately a really nice choice not to have her be so alone, because that also then leads to this beautiful friendship with Janae, and finally leads her to someone who can give her a little bit of shelter and security, and like, hey, you are okay and you are great as you are. So, yeah.
And when it comes to the dynamic with Simon, there's so much complexity that comes for your character following his death. There's the idea that she literally witnesses in front of her. She is fully aware that she should have tried to do something but didn't, and carries that regret. And at the same time, this is someone that she had a lot of animosity to, who was threatening to blow up everything that she'd worked to so carefully curate. And so when you were filming the funeral scene where she shows up, how did you go into that and think about the different dynamics and really bringing forth all of those aspects where it's, there is trauma, there is a little bit of grief, there's some regret, but there's also still a lot of anger and resentment that comes out in that quiet moment by herself as well?
Yeah, that was a lot of journaling work before that, kind of those 2 days that we filmed that. And then a lot of listening to some playlists, but also Just watching some movies about more kind of just drug use and drug abuse, because that's really, I think, the moment where everything catches up to her, and everything she has to continue to get that relief from all of these thoughts and all of these things. Like you said, there's so much going in her head at that time. There's so much of that anger, resentment, but also fear, just everything going on. And so that was a lot of research kind of like leading up to that point. And then how she can, like in my head, to make it okay, but how she can lie to her boyfriend, who she loves more than she says she loves more than anything in the world. And she can lie so well and so real to him and tell him, no, I didn't do it. I mean, that was a whole kind of building process of like, you still want to, that has to come from a place. It almost weirdly enough, comes from like a place of love, but mostly like also insecurity and also fear. And so finding the right tone for it was definitely a little bit of a process. But yeah, it was good to build up to, because when we go back into that flashback and we see her interaction with Simon and we see like this hatred for him, and then we see that he actually like he kind of cares for her. He feels bad for her. He feels sorry for her. And I think that her also, she is a strong character. And so her also resenting the fact that he feels bad for her, not just that he knows her secret, but that he feels bad for her. I think that she also kind of hates that a little bit. Like, how dare you feel bad for me? Do you not see I have a perfect life? But she doesn't. She's a mess. She's a mess. Yeah. So it was a very fun scene to build to.
Were there any other key scenes that you found journaling a really useful tool for, or were you also utilizing that a lot at the beginning before you even started filming, in terms of fleshing out a lot of elements of backstory going into those early scenes that you were filming first?
Yeah, I would say definitely did a lot. We had a 2-week quarantine in New Zealand, so had a lot of time to dive into it there. And then sometimes, when you show up on set, it's nice to kind of feel like you've done the work and let it go, so you can actually be present in the moment. But
there were for sure scenes, even like Addie's feeling, even though it's not actually betrayal, but her feeling of betrayal when she thinks that Janae maybe is the one that's done all of this, where all of a sudden this new friendship and relationship in her life, she's finally letting her guard down. And then to feel that absolute betrayal, that no, like, I shouldn't have let my guard down. This girl also has betrayed me. She's also hiding secrets from me. She also is not who she says she is. And I remember that was just such a fun day. Just also like getting to hold a knife and like, like little crying scenes. It's just, it's very satisfying as an actor to do any of those big emotional scenes, because you're like, the release, And that was one thing as an actor, like in the beginning, there was no release for Addie. She's constantly like holding it here, and it's this like nervous tension and energy. And so like being able to just like, let go. That was always a good feeling.
And working with all of the main core cast, especially because there are so many ensemble scenes, and it is the moments where your characters are kind of like holding on to but unleashing the tension in different ways, and each of those scenes really build and grow what that group dynamic is. At the beginning, it's people who don't necessarily spend any time with each other. By the end, there's actually a real intrinsic trust, and obviously there's all that happens in between with a lot of animosity and distrust at different moments. And it sounds like you had a really great cast dinner at the beginning that kind of turned into several hours. And do you find that actually just having that time to really just sit and be with one another without even necessarily talking about the project or characters or specific scenes, that is also what really allows you to have what you were saying before about just being really present in the moment, listening within scenes, and to be a different type of scene partner when you have the opportunity for that?
Entirely. And I do think it changes depending on the circumstances the characters are playing. But for this specifically, I think that it was really, really nice that we knew each other so well. So we really could show up to these scenes and just be so present, be there for each other. Even, a lot of us tell our secrets in front of the others and have these really vulnerable moments, and to feel so supported, not just by the other characters, but to feel supported by the actors, that were playing the characters. I think that was huge. And I mean, this cast specifically, I'm sure you've seen, we all just, it's a great, great group of people and very talented. And
yeah, but I think that also, it changes, depending on the situation too, because I'm sure there's some other actors, like it's almost nice to keep a little bit of like a distance, so that when you actually get to the scene, it kind of holds the tension or holds the spark and everything, and just changes depending on character. Yeah.
And obviously, so much of the show is about whether people are telling the truth, whether there's secrecy behind things at different points. And there's even a moment early on where someone says to Addie that she's a terrible liar. And it's always really obvious when she's lying. But actually, kind of through necessity, it feels like she becomes a better liar as the show goes on and manages to hide her tells. And what did you want those slight tells and giveaways to be at the beginning that then start to dissipate and disappear as she gets into deeper, more serious things that she really has to be able to hold on to in a different way?
Yeah, I wanted it to be the quite obvious, again, the touching the hair, the nerves, right? Every time you lie, or every time you're like overthinking, just kind of like fidgeting a little bit more, like maybe like eyes moving a bit quicker around, like what happens when you, like, these tells are, everyone has them differently. Some people like very much, they focus their eyes or something. And I very like specific, like the first time that Addie really lies to Jake, she doesn't take her eyes off of him. Like she's like right there. She figures out how to do it well. And then it's interesting. Like by the end, in that final scene, she lies to the detective, and it's like, it's so natural. Like for her, it's just so natural to lie about something so huge. It was definitely just a process of figuring out the fine little details. And it was all part of the same thing. In the beginning, it's the tension up here. And slowly she grounds herself, and slowly it kind of settles in. And it's kind of sad, right? The lying is so obvious when she's insecure and nervous. And then it kind of just settles in with who she is. But I think because she's more confident in herself and more confident in what she wants. And so the lies become less about, they become more important in a way, whether good or bad, but they do become more important for her to have to cover up. And
And as you got deeper into filming episode by episode, did you start to feel an evolution, even just in the way that you were working on scenes or figuring out how she was going to respond to certain situations as she kind of became much more of you and you inhabited her so much more and got really used to like, okay, I know exactly how she's going to respond in this situation, as opposed to kind of playing around with a couple of different directions as much?
totally. I feel like once she cut off her hair too, she was so easy to access. I think in the beginning, and that's where some of the conversations in the beginning, like me feeling one way about her and then kind of, talking to our showrunner and like going different ways. But then once it was like, we all kind of this like cohesive unit. Once she cut off her hair, it felt like it was all right there. And that was also fun. I think also just being able to work every day. And like you said, like as the season went on, so much of the work in the beginning and even when we were first started filming, there was so much kind of like doing, and then you slowly start to just get more comfortable with the character, with each other, with the process, the routine. And so it kind of like in a really nice way, it relaxes itself. And I think it's like the reminder, like on camera, just like I'm just trying to be, and I'm learning to try to be as relaxed as possible. Even when you're feeling all these emotions, like relax into it, breathe into it, be human, don't keep it up here. And so even just as Addie was experiencing it, I probably got lucky because, like Addie's journey is nice in that, like when I was feeling not relaxed, Addie's not relaxed. And then I also got more comfortable just as Addie did. So I really cheated is what I did. I really just played it. Yeah. Pulled it out of somewhere. But that's a really good question. Cause it's true. It's just you get more comfortable as the season goes on.
Yeah, and it's so rare that you get to have the same journey as your character, like you were just saying.
Yeah, so rare. I feel so lucky to have done it. And I grew so much. Talked about this before, but just getting to play her and seeing kind of, she gets lost in her insecurities and her nerves. And it was weird because in New Zealand, that first little bit, I felt weirdly like I had almost internalized it too much, where like I felt myself. You kind of lose yourself for a little bit, and you're kind of like, you just get stuck in the character and the character's kind of world. And then it was nice as she gained strength for me also be like, oh yeah, wait, I'm not Addie, I'm Anna. But also this new Addie is also close to Anna. Great. We're going to move forward with confidence and whatever else. So yeah.
And when it came to playing Addie in the show, what elements of her as a character ended up being the ones that challenged you the most?
I think again, it was definitely emotional component of, especially in the beginning, of the breaking up with Jake, of the dealing with TJ. There was just, I think there was a little bit of a block for me as an actor that I had to kind of figure out and work through, and, you know, like let go of whatever past or whatever was affecting that block. And so that was really interesting to have to like to experience that, like kind of resistance to something. That was definitely a challenge. And then similarly, like the insecurities that Addie faces, and then seeing myself sometimes on screen, and then those insecurities manifesting themselves just as Addie's was in the beginning, you know, like working through that was a really good learning experience and growing. And again, and that's why I say I feel like I was Addie for that first little bit, because it was so much of what she was dealing with, I felt was mirrored and paralleled in my life at the time. And let's just say life imitates art, art imitates life. It's so strange.
Well, it's been so fun to watch everything that you've done in the show. It's such a great binge-worthy series, and thank you so much for talking about it with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for watching. Thank you for the great questions. Fantastic.